Hi, I'm Lily Peterson. Welcome to Beyond Benefits with Benefits Pro. For this episode, we're talking to Tracy Watts, Senior Partner and National Leader for the U.S. Health Policy at Mercer. But first, while Paul is at the Ascend conference, we have a special guest joining the intro today.
Hi, I'm Zach Nyheisel. I produce this show as well as produce our sister show Shared Accounts with CU Times. And just a little bit about me. I am on the Kentucky side of the Cincinnati area, and I live with my wife and daughter, and I don't know what else I'm supposed to say, Lily.
No, that was perfect. Well, we're excited to have you and to finally, hear your voice and have someone here, kind of shed light on how much you do for us. So we're excited to have you. But I do have a question for you, since Paul and I are very avid readers, and I know you read quite a bit. At least that's what it seems like. So, what is either your favorite book or one you would recommend to our audience?
So you sent me this question before we recorded, and I'm glad because it gave me time to think. Otherwise, I would have panicked. I think if I was going to answer my favorite book, I think I'd have to give two titles. I'd have to say at least the one I've read the most is Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas by Hunter S. Thompson.
Okay, yeah, I haven't read it, so I'm gonna write all of these down to read.
It's fun. I mean, it's a product of its time. It definitely helps that I read it for the first time as like a nihilistic teenager.
Yeah.
And I would say the other answer I'd give is I love Kurt Vonnegut.
Okay, yeah.
So I would say Sirens of Titan because it's his most pure sci-fi book while still being his, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. No, that's good. Okay, look at that. I'm glad you were prepared. I feel like whenever I get asked that question, I agree. I panic because I'm like, I've read a million books and I like most of them. So
I pulled up my Goodreads this morning when you sent me the question.
good. You had to do some research for this.
I had to start I did an elimination process.
Perfect. Well, I think it's only fair that I share my favorite book just so you don't feel so, naked with your thoughts out there. But I guess I have two. I'll go with two. One I read in high school that just I loved so much was The Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger. I don't know why it really stuck with me, but I loved it. And I thought it was just like a really good portrayal of trauma and depression, but still having to use, your thinking cap to put two and two together. So
I think everyone needs to read that book as a teenager
yeah,
because for it to really hit the way it needs to, I think you have to be around that age because otherwise you'll be too jaded and just think of Holden as a whiny brat.
yes,
Whereas if you
I
can
agree.
empathize with him, it'll really hit differently. I read somewhere you should read it every 10 years because you'll have a different perspective every time.
Oh, that's good. That's a good idea. I haven't heard of that. Well, I mean, yeah, I feel like, reading it as a teenager, I'm like angsty just like him. So, and then a more fun one is Beach Read by Emily Henry. It's like the most perfect rom-com book I've ever read. It's based in, I think it's on Lake Michigan,
Okay.
in one of those little beach towns. It's adorable and perfect, and you just fall in love with the characters. And it's helpful that the characters in the book are authors, and that's just fun to read for me. So,
Self-insert.
yeah, exactly. All right. Well, we should move on to Paul and I's interview with Tracy Watts, again, the senior partner and national leader for U.S. healthcare policy at Mercer. We chat about a number of topics, including her thoughts on all the noise coming out of Washington, D.C., the latest round of fiduciary lawsuits and their potential impacts, and a few of the innovative benefits design strategies and ideas she's watching most closely right now. Come for the benefits discussion, stay for the golf debates, killer recipes, and cookbook recommendations. We have all of that and more coming up next. Joining us today is Tracy Watts, Senior Partner and National Leader for the U.S. Health Policy at Mercer. Welcome to Beyond Benefits, Tracy.
Thank you so much for having me.
Hey, Tracy, we're so happy you're here. So, how are things going over in your world? I know with everything coming out of Washington, D.C. and everywhere across the nation, there's a lot going on. So, I imagine you're pretty busy right now.
There is a lot going on, but that's what keeps us all busy and employed. So I'm going to say that's a good thing.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we'll dive into it a little bit more here in a minute, but I know you've been traveling a lot. The last week or so, we've been touching base. It sounds like you've had some travel chaos and everything, but now you're semi settled for a little while.
Yeah,
Good.
Well, so for those who aren't familiar with you and your company, would you mind giving a little background about yourself, your company, and kind of what your day to day looks like?
sure. Mercer is a consulting firm. We're part of Marsh & McLennan, and we focus on employee benefits, human resources, basically anything that touches workers. And we have offices in just about every major city here in the U.S. I've been with Mercer for 38 years. And in thinking about, how I would describe my job for this audience, I would say I do a lot of things that benefits all of us and the work that we do. Pretty much everything that I work on is a representation of our research, what employers want, what they're thinking about, what they're doing, workers, what they want, what's important to them, and then translating that to the market to help drive impact, whether it's on Capitol Hill as we think about policies that help our business and help our clients, or if it's through something that I'm working on right now, which is the National Commission on Climate and Workforce Health, and thinking about how extreme weather events are going to impact workers and businesses and what are the things that we can help them do to protect their workers. So a lot of that really is just under an umbrella that we call driving impact.
So, yeah, it sounds like you're kind of all over the place, which I imagine probably keeps things fresh. Something like the climate project, I assume, is a relatively new thing for you. But then I know that in the past you focused on like cost, for example, or plan design and things like that. So it sounds like you're kind of an expert in many things.
Well, it helps that we do a lot of research. And so that's kind of the evidence, if you will, to convince people to either do something or not do something sometimes. But, there's a lot going on. And I would say, top of mind for all of us is just what's happening with healthcare costs. And it's really interesting because I think that sometimes the finger gets pointed at us, brokers saying that we're making too much, or the insurance companies, they're making too much. But the fact of the matter is that healthcare is expensive because healthcare is expensive. It costs a lot. Costs have gone up for office visits. Costs have gone up for hospitalizations. People are getting more care, more services, and it's expensive. And that is the biggest thing on all of our clients' minds right now is healthcare costs. And so it's just something this year I think is going to be really, really challenging.
Yeah, absolutely. And that, like you said, has been the trend for a while now. I mean, again, going back to Washington, but also other things that you're seeing, but specifically on Washington, D.C. for now, when you're up on the Hill, what are you kind of watching most closely related to healthcare cost or benefits in general, keeping in mind that a lot of our listeners like you are benefits advisors. So, what are you hearing and seeing that would be of interest to them these days?
Yeah, I would say, as I think about health policy and our business, broadly all of our business, I think that there's kind of three things that are super important. Number one on the list is preserving and enhancing the tax treatment of employer-sponsored health coverage. And I'll just say that, as we're tracking the reconciliation package, we are very concerned that attention will be drawn to that. As of, last week when I was on the Hill, that is not the case. But we do know that the Senate is still considering some changes to what the House sent over to them. We should hear more about that this week, but that's number one on the list. I would say number two is protecting ERISA preemption, just to, make sure that national employers can have uniformity across their programs. And we have seen some threats to that more at the state level, especially through some of the pharmacy legislation that we've seen advance at the state level. And then last is what I think all of us work on every single day, and that's just trying to get more transparency, more accountability, addressing affordability, just to drive, competition and value in the markets. And, from that perspective, we have been trying to refresh the opportunity for telemedicine visits to be covered pre-deductible in a high deductible health plan, HSA eligible health plan. And in the legislation right now is the opportunity for direct primary care and to use those funds for gym memberships. I would just argue that the telemedicine is super, super important. When I was on the Hill last week, I talked to a couple of offices that agree with our interest from a telemedicine perspective. And a few of them have said, hey, this needs to be all or nothing. You can't just put in part of this and not include the other part. So I'm not sure what's going to happen with that. But I will just say, kind of as a side note, that we've been tracking the impact of telemedicine on mental health benefits, right? Because there's a shortage of mental health providers in the US. I mean, we have a huge access issue just because of the provider situation. And then secondly, people live in areas where they just don't have access because it's a rural area or whatever. And since before the pandemic, we have tracked an increase in the number of people that are accessing mental health care visits. So like the numbers per 1,000, I think we're up to about 10% of plan members are getting mental health benefits. We've also seen an increase in the visits per 1,000. And most importantly, 30% of those visits are telebehavioral health visits. And that has remained pretty constant for about the past 2 years. And so that is just a critical way for people to access mental health benefits. And so that's kind of an example of when we go to the Hill and talk to lawmakers or staffers, the kinds of data points that we share to make an issue like that super real for them.
Yeah, no, that's a great example. I mean, we had a couple of shows ago, we had Salome Tibubu on, and she is heavily involved in behavioral health and behavioral health tech. And we were talking a lot about anytime, of course, behavioral and mental health is so important, but it seems like increasingly more and more every day. So that's a great point about telehealth and the key role that it plays, because among many other reasons, there's the access issue, but there's also still the stigma issue that we all know about with behavioral health. So I would imagine something like telehealth and telemedicine would help with that to kind of remove any potential stigma that's still remaining and give people a safe place. So, no, that's a great point. Well, I'll turn it over to Lily here in a second to ask some questions, but I had one more I just wanted to slip in here, which was read the headlines these days, whether it's on Benefits Pro or CNN or wherever you go, there's a lot of stuff happening right now. And in many ways, it feels kind of unprecedented, some of the things that are happening. Since you have an insider's view and you're there, I mean, would you say that this truly is an unprecedented time and all this chaos is unlike anything we've seen before? Or can that be a little bit deceiving, and beneath all of it, there is still some things that we recognize going on?
I think that there is a lot going on, and I do think that it adds to the stress of individuals. And I have a stat that I'm not going to get this 100% right, but basically around 40% of workers said that they have stress in their life. And another high percentage said that they are stressed at work. And then when you ask overall, do you have both of those? It's about 35% of workers. And I thought it was interesting. Harvard Business Review ran a piece, I think it was last week, that basically said mental health is not a HR and benefits issue. Mental health is a business issue. And I do think that it impacts productivity. Depending on your culture, it could impact collaboration, could impact the drive that people have, when they show up for work every day. And so I think that it is definitely something that employers, businesses need to be focused on. We just released our annual health strategy survey for this year, and 76% of the employers in the survey, and these are going to be employers with 500 or more employees, but 76% of them said that they are providing digital resources for stress management and resiliency. And, we've been talking about resiliency for a long time. And I think that's a concept that a lot of people have difficulty really connecting with. But it really came true for me as I started working on climate and extreme weather events. And my analogy is you can't teach somebody to swim when they're drowning. You've got to start when someone's young and teach them how to swim and give them those skills. And I think the same thing with any type of stressor in your life, whether it's the environment, whether it's culturally, whether it's socioeconomic. I mean, there's all sorts of stressors, but how do you build that resiliency? And I think that that's something that's worthwhile for all of us to spend some time thinking about and working on.
Yeah, absolutely. And honestly, I would say the 35% or whatever you said of employees being stressed, that seems low to me. I don't know, if I was going to guess, I would guess that there's a lot more people stressed out these days than even that. So yeah, your points are exactly right.
Yeah, well, kind of switching gears back to what Paul was saying earlier, there are a lot of legislative moves and lawsuits in the news these days, and you hit on it a little bit, but I was curious what specifically employers and HR folks should be paying attention to currently in DC or at the state level or any of that.
Very good question. So, the things that we are focused on, as I mentioned, number one is just the tax treatment of benefits. And I don't know how much that is on your listeners' radar screens, but early on in the budget process, we were hearing that on the House side that they were thinking about a cap on the employer exclusion, which is very similar to the Cadillac tax that we got repealed during the ACA. But on the Senate side, that they were thinking about taxing individuals on the value of their healthcare benefits. So it's that number now that shows up on your W-2. And we did focus groups with workers to see their reaction because we were kind of preparing for, what we were going to say to Congress. And people got it. They were like, are you kidding me? Like that could put me in the next tax bracket, or I could have to pay taxes on that. And what if I didn't even use my benefits that year, And so it was very shocking just at the, let's call it the taxpayer level. And we've shared that information. But more importantly, when in our health strategy survey, when we asked employers, hey, if this were to happen, what would you do? And in both instances, a fairly high percentage of employers said we'd have no choice but to shift costs, And for everything that Congress has said about healthcare and the importance of affordability, that would go in the exact opposite direction. And so the tax issue just is number one. I can't say it enough. But beyond that, things like the HSA plans, even though we've seen some interest kind of taper off in those because we are seeing more enrollment go into plans where people get a little bit more first dollar coverage. But nonetheless, being sure that somebody can get telemedicine pre-deductible and an HSA eligible plan is important. I think beyond that, transparency is something that employers should be keeping an eye on. As we all know, we've seen an increase in lawsuits that have been filed. The fiduciary responsibility of employers is definitely, under the microscope right now. And there are some areas where employers don't have great transparency. And so that is an important issue to all of us. And so we'll have to see, how that plays out. So those are kind of the ones that are most top of mind. I will say that there are a number of proposals that Congress has considered on and off related to pharmacy benefits. So your listeners can write in the comments if they agree with this or not. But our point of view tends to be, don't take away all the levers that an employer can pull to manage their health benefits. So if they want rebates, let them have rebates. If they, want to do spread pricing, let them do spread pricing. But let's have the option for what we want to do so an employer can decide how that best works for them. We just need transparency into how that will work. And so there's not a lot going on with pharmacy specifically around those kinds of provisions right now. I did see that last week, 2 senators introduced a bill to ban direct-to-consumer advertising on TV for pharmaceuticals. I don't know if that will make it through, but pharmacy for sure, since that's the number one driver of trend. Anytime something comes up on that, we're all going to be paying close attention to that. We have to do that at the state level too. There's a number of states that have advanced laws around pharmacy with different impacts to employers, and those are very important for all of us to keep an eye on.
I know Lily has another question, but I'm just going to jump in really fast to touch on, you mentioned the fiduciary lawsuits that we're seeing right now. One of the things that I've heard from a lot of people in the industry that has started to change is the fact that now individuals within companies are starting to be named in the lawsuits. So instead of it just saying XYZ company, it's so-and-so who is CEO or CFO. So, do you agree that that might be kind of a big sea change moment where it's not only the company themselves, but it's starting to call out the actual individual fiduciaries? Like that's adding a lot of pressure. Wouldn't you agree?
It certainly is. And I think that it's something that, will make companies very nervous. And so, we are seeing a very major focus on governance within the companies that we work with so as to protect the company and their individuals from that.
That's interesting. I do think it is honestly, on the note of transparency, it seems more transparent that this is how, these lawsuits are going. But kind of going back to what we were talking about earlier, focusing on benefit advisors, HR folks, that kind of stuff. Do you have any advice on how to focus on what matters to benefit advisors and their employer clients, and, how to tune out that unnecessary noise that comes along with all of these conversations, all of these lawsuits, everything that's happening in the news?
Yeah, I know for the clients that I talk to that they all have different issues, different things that they're focused on. And I think first and foremost, you really have to be a student of their business and their priorities and their challenges, because that is what will help you prioritize what you need to be doing with them. And for some, it's going to be cost is king. They're in a low margin situation, or they're in an industry that maybe is on the decline right now. And so how they can attract and retain their employees with benefits and make the most of every single penny that they have to spend on it is what they're going to be focused on. Whereas if you're working with a company that's doing very well, they may be one of the ones that has a target on their back for fiduciary lawsuits. And so they need to be focused on governance. And so I always think that rule number one is, be a student of your client's business.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, touching on that, you're talking to employers every day, you're talking to legislators, you're talking to other benefits leaders. Where do you think right now you're seeing the most traction and movement, the most positive signs, with all of these actions? And where are you maybe starting to see more struggles or pushback?
So I think that the one thing that everybody agrees is important and anything that we can do is a great thing is mental health. And, we were just talking about stress and how stressed out everybody is. I think that employers have done a lot since we were hit by the pandemic to really beef up their mental health benefits. And we've seen that happen. And in fact, the increase in use of mental health benefits pre-pandemic to now, it's up 38%, according to our data. I looked up the number while we were talking. And so I think that for me, that's a real bright light that is going on. I think that we're in a situation where the good news is we have the best care available to us, and we have a lot of companies that continue to push the envelope to invent new treatments, new therapies, new ways to save people's lives. And the bad news is it comes at a cost. And so I think we're at a crossroads where, as an industry, we're all trying to figure out how does that intersection point manifest itself into our clients' lives, into the affordability aspect, into, some type of pooling or, whatever, to try to be sure that we can make those treatments and therapies available to plan members, but not break the bank. So that's really, really top of mind for employers. Gene and cellular therapy is just, a really hot topic these days. But it's kind of a good problem to have, right? When you think about the benefits that it brings.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Kind of what we've been talking about, this entire time is you've spent a significant time identifying issues within the healthcare system and beyond. If you could enact one policy change at the federal level to address these problems, what would it be and why?
Oh my gosh.
We're giving you a magic wand. You have so much power.
Wow. You know what? Nobody has ever asked me that question before.
We might even let you have two.
Oh my gosh. I would need to think about that for a minute. So it would be a change at the policy level.
Yeah, that was our initial thought. But if you want to take it in a different direction, you're welcome to.
Yeah, feel free to tweak the question to what you want to answer.
Yeah. I think what I would want to focus on, I don't know if this is a policy issue per se, but I think what I would want to focus on is access to care for the people who really don't have it. And so when you think about, for example, breast cancer is more prevalent in Black women than white women. And yet their use of mammograms is low. And we also have an issue where you go for that mammogram, and if you have to go back for the second one, that may not be covered 100% under preventive care. And so they don't go back because they're scared. There's an issue of we need to solve for access to care. There's another stat Only 1 in 5 primary care physicians in America have prescribed PrEP, the preventive care drug for HIV, or are comfortable prescribing PrEP. And that's a huge access issue. This is something that we could put an end to by 2030 if we could just get widespread adoption of testing and use of PrEP. It's possible. I mean, that drug is more effective than birth control. And so I just think examples of people that need care that don't have access to it, whether it's affordability, whether it's geography, whether it's they can't find a provider that they connect with from a racial and ethnic diversity perspective, that's what I would want to solve for.
Oh, that's a great answer. We appreciate you letting us put you on the spot, but I think you knocked it out of the park. Well, we spend a lot of our time talking to benefits advisors and others who are kind of on the cutting edge of the industry, people who are innovating, pushing the boundaries, poking at the edges of what can be done, whether that's through self-funding. You mentioned earlier direct primary care, reference-based pricing. There's all these really cool ideas out there that people are exploring. What are some interesting things that you're hearing about or that you're excited about right now that are kind of on that cutting edge of the industry that are kind of maybe shaking things up or trying something new?
Yeah, so we have seen fairly good adoption of variable copay plans. So you give people a tool and they need care and they can go on the tool and they have choices for where to go for care. And they're given information on the quality of those providers and also the cost. And if they make the selection based on quality and cost, then they pay less out of their pocket. And we've seen those be effective. And I have to say, I was a little skeptical about that in the beginning. But I think that we're at a point in time where, first of all, there's a lot of sensitivity on affordability as it relates to healthcare. And so that in itself is a motivator. I also think that access to care is kind of an issue. A lot of practices aren't accepting new patients. And so having a tool like that can help guide you is super helpful. The other thing that I think is really cool, I'm going to go a totally different direction because you said innovation, is I'm really liking what I'm seeing in terms of innovation as it relates to benefits delivery and the use of artificial intelligence for like level 0 and level 1 type questions. And we've even seen like some bake-offs, if you will. That's kind of an old-fashioned term, but where they've put AI against an expert and, no surprise, AI wins. Now, you have to train it properly. And I'm not talking about generative AI that could make up their own answers. I'm just talking about answers purely based on the correct response. And I'm super encouraged by that. I think that is just a really interesting thing for our industry to pay a lot of attention to and think about in terms of both how we service our customers as well as how we conduct our own business more efficiently.
Yeah, no, that's a great answer. I think obviously that the AI conversation is involved in everything now. So I think it's important you brought up that in relevance to our industry. So yeah, great answer. Thank you.
Yeah, I love that.
Well, a big part of creating change, which we're all trying to do, we're trying to tweak and change this giant system that's entrenched in so many ways. But a big part of that involves, like we said earlier, stirring the pot and calling out the issues and the problems. But on a day-to-day basis, whether you're talking to employers, employees, legislators, how do you kind of balance the necessary part of calling out the issues and raising alarms where they need to be, but also trying to remain positive and inspirational?
I think that one of the things that I like to remind people about is that still today, and we have research on this, workers say that they trust their employer more than anybody as it relates to their health benefits. And I think that that's an important thing for all of us to keep in mind. I actually have somebody pulling a stat because we asked a question in our Health on Demand survey about people rely on their employer to kind of keep them safe and to protect them. That's something that's become important as we think about these weather-related disasters and emergencies. The role that businesses play is so very important. And the cultures that they develop inside their organization have everything to do with how that worker feels and how they perform. We've got survey data that says that over half of employees expect/want their employer to be focused on environmental sustainability. I've been with Mercer for 38 years, so I'm not in one of those younger generations that values that. It doesn't mean that I don't value it, but I will say that it's not something that I would have ever thought about 10 or more years ago. And so I think that, we're all challenged to kind of be everything to everybody in our workforce. And I feel like that's the puzzle that as benefits advisors, we're trying to help our clients solve, but in a good way, And so that's why we have really cool family forming benefits now. That's why we have great mental health benefits. Now we're starting to focus on men's health issues. Like, employers want to take care of everybody. They just want to use every penny that they have very wisely on it so that their workers get what they need and so that they get that good positive benefit out of it. So that's what I stay focused on. And again, being a student of your client's business will help you marry those two objectives together.
Yeah, love that.
I love that. It is interesting to see, what each generation wants from their employer, because it is, like you said, sometimes it is just so different, like day and night different. Well, for a long time now, our industry has been stuck in the status quo and is viewed as reluctant to change and adapt. Do you see this shifting at all? And if so, how can we keep this going?
So I think that's interesting that you say that we're reluctant to change and adapt, because I feel like we really have. I don't know, as your advisors look out over their book of business, I think that we've seen a shift in how our clients work with us, and I think that we have risen to that occasion. So, for example, I'm pretty sure there's decent data out there that says that in our industry, we're probably doing more stuff now on a fee basis than we are straight commission basis. I think that in itself shows openness to working with our client in different ways. I think we're all bringing a lot more services to the table than we have historically. I mean, it seems like every year we have more and more things that we have to learn about and be able to talk to our clients about. I think that the regulatory environment has become a lot more tough, and we've had to spend a lot more time and our own resources to be knowledgeable on those issues and to help our clients address those issues. So I don't feel like we're stuck in the same place. I think that we've grown a lot and we're responding to the market and really want to be there for our clients. So hopefully your listeners feel the same way.
No, I love that. I mean, I love the positivity. I would also argue, if I'm playing a little bit of devil's advocate, also, I think some of the people who were reluctant to change, starting around the ACA and beyond, they did not change, and therefore they are no longer in the industry. So maybe to some degree, the people who are still sticking around are the ones who either chose to innovate or who have come into the industry with fresh eyes and are trying new things. Because I do think there was a time where maybe the industry was seen that way. And that's kind of why we wanted to throw that question in there is, I like your positive attitude. And I think that we're starting to see that at our expo and elsewhere is there's a lot of, it's almost like a grassroots movement of like things are happening now. So,
well, I see that too, Paul. And I know that there are people out there that say, oh, your broker doesn't have your best interest in mind or things like that. But I think as long as you're bringing new ideas to your client, they know what you're doing. And the fact of the matter is we're in a successful business, and so we're a target. Somebody's going to come in and say, you know what, I'm going to create a new market. I'm going to create a new way of looking at things, a new value proposition. And you know what? That just keeps us on our feet. When you are tired of changing or you're no longer willing to change, then you need to get into another industry because our industry changes all the time. And yeah, there's a lot of competition out there, but that's what keeps the market moving. And that's what drives us to do our very best for our clients.
I love that. I agree. I also think, kind of what Paul is saying, when we're at our expo, when we're talking on LinkedIn, when we're doing all these things, you do hear from people that it is positive change and it is this momentum. And again, kind of just reiterating what Paul said, this grassroots movement of just people want to help, and brokers are not the enemy. They are so passionate every time I talk to someone. So it is nice to also, have you reiterate that point in this industry. Well, how can we keep bringing in younger and more diverse candidates to keep this innovation going?
That's a really interesting question. So we just welcomed our summer interns. A couple of weeks ago, I saw something internally at Mercer where offices had posted pictures of their interns. And I think that that's such a great way for somebody to come in and kind of try out our business. I don't know of anybody that enters college and says that they want to do what we're doing, probably because they don't know about it. I mean, I think I spent half of my career trying to help my mother be able to explain to people what I did in my job when somebody asked her. So I love the intern idea, and we do a lot of on-campus recruiting, and we rely on, our colleagues to also recruit as well. So I would encourage, your readers, listeners to think about, how they're offering up those types of opportunities, whether it's an internship program or a college hire program. The fact of the matter is that people come in and try this and they either love it or they don't. If you're in the middle somewhere, you shouldn't do this. Like if you want to do what we do for a living, you need to really love it. And I'm sure you've seen that in everybody that you talk to at your expo and everybody that you bring on your podcast, that, they have a drive and a passion for our business. And if you can give somebody kind of that tryout of being in our business, I think that you'll find the right people that want to carry the torch forward.
Yeah, that's a great answer. And just touching on what we were saying earlier about the different generations too, I think one of the things I keep hearing about the younger generation, if you can expose them to what you do every day, just like you said, they'll realize this is not boring insurance. This is actually like making a difference in people's lives, helping their healthcare, which ties right into what a lot of the younger generation wants to do for their careers, is make a difference in the world. So yeah, I think that's exactly right what you said.
No, I was just going to say one other thing too is it's really good to have somebody come in with no preconceived notions about our business and be a part of what we're doing and hear their observations and listen to their ideas, because they might be really good ideas. And I think that that's how we continue to drive great change, is seeing things through the eyes of our future customers. And that's exactly what you're doing when you hire the interns, the college graduates.
I love that. Well, one more question for this part, and then we're going to have just a couple of fun questions about you to end things off. But we're going to put you on the spot one more time for this last question here. I'm going to ask you to finish this sentence for me. And the sentence is, the thing that makes me most excited about the future of our industry is?
I think is how we can use data and technology to help everybody be the healthiest version of themselves.
That's a great answer.
I agree. I love that.
Yeah. Well, now it's time to move on to just a couple quick questions for fun, all about you, so people can get to know you a little better. Are you ready?
Sure.
Okay. Well, as we touched on earlier, as exciting as this industry can be, it can also be, realistically pretty rough on people. Like it chews up a lot of people and spits them out. So how do you relax and refresh in your free time?
So a couple of things. I really enjoy cooking. And I think the reason why is because you have a start, a finish, and an end. You get kind of that immediate gratification. And when you think about the kinds of projects that we work on, sometimes they could take months, even years. And so I love cooking. I also just love getting people together and just, sitting around a table with a group of people and having great conversation. And so I would say that's probably part of my escape. The other thing that I'll say is I live with my husband and our 1-year-old Australian Shepherd, and we live near a beach. And so I really love when the three of us get out and go for a beach walk. And we do that definitely both mornings on the weekends. And if I'm in town, maybe can sneak in one in the mornings during the week.
1-year-old Australian Shepherd. I imagine all of the exercise you can get is needed.
Yeah, he's a maniac.
Yeah, I bet.
And I'll tell you, his name is Benny. Oh. My husband named him, but a lot of people ask me if I named him Benny because I'm in the benefits business, and the answer is no.
It's a good question, though. It's a good question.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of cooking, I cook all the time with my boyfriend at home. It's how we spend quality time together, and we love it so much. So what is your go-to recipe?
Oh, so for something really, really quick and easy, we love the Argentinian red shrimp. You can actually buy them frozen. You just drop them in boiling water for 90 seconds and put together a salad, maybe even straight out of a bag if you're in that big of a hurry, and you have dinner on the table. So that is my easy. My more complicated, Ina Garten has a great recipe for chicken thighs in a mustard cream sauce. I highly recommend it. I've never fed it to anybody that didn't love it. It's just you can make it ahead of time. It's a great dinner party entree.
That sounds so good. Now I'm
I know.
starving.
That's what I was just about to say. I'm instantly hungry now.
I know. I didn't know I would want shrimp at 9 in the morning, but now I'm craving it. You kind of mentioned, a chef earlier, that chicken thigh recipe. Is there any other favorite cookbooks or blogs that you go to for if you don't know what to cook?
Oh, so we mainly eat recipes from a woman who has cookbooks, and you can follow her on Instagram. Her cookbook name is under Skinny Taste. And so it's really healthy recipes, generally with fresh ingredients. Her name is Gina, I believe, Homolka. It's Gina, I don't know how you spell it, but Skinny Taste is how you can find her on Instagram. And totally, totally love her recipes. She has a recipe for air fryer chicken breast, and it's boneless, skinless chicken breast, right? Which can be like the driest, worst piece of meat ever.
Right.
This is the juiciest chicken breast you will ever eat in your whole life. I cook a lot in the air fryer, but I follow in that recipe the oven method because you sear the chicken in a cast iron skillet and then you finish it in the oven. But you brine it for like an hour and then you put the rub on it and do the sear and finish it in the oven. That chicken is the juiciest chicken breast you will ever eat. I make batches of them and actually individually wrap them and put them in the freezer because when I'm on the road, my husband can just pull one out and have that on a salad or with a vegetable or whatever. But
Oh, that's so
the
smart.
best recipe by far.
I love that.
Yeah, now I'm going to have to tell her to listen to Paul's podcast so that she
Yeah.
can know that I was promoting her to all these benefits professionals that are your listeners.
Absolutely. I love that. Well, we better change the subject because I'm starving now. So I know another thing that you do in your free time, if I'm not mistaken, is you're a big golfer, right?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, neither Lily or I are necessarily golfers. So tell me what you love about it. Like, what is it that draws you to golf?
So I'm just wondering, would you consider yourself just as an individual to be kind of competitive, really just like competitive with yourself, like in terms of, what you achieve in your life?
Yeah.
At times, yes.
So I think the cool thing about golf is that even though you're playing with 3 other people, you have a handicap and it's really just you against the golf course. And you're just trying to beat your handicap when you play the golf course that day. And so I think it satisfies like a competitive desire. And a lot of people have a bet, like we might just have like a dollar bet or something. But so, you got the competitive aspects. But the other thing is that I just love getting outside and being with some friends or people that I enjoy being around. I tend to not think about work when I go and do that. I tend to just think about, what's going on with the game, the people that I'm with, just enjoying being in that environment. And so I find that to be very relaxing. It's really very much an escape for me. It does take a long time to play. If you follow the rules and everything, you're supposed to play in 4 hours. So that's quite a time commitment. I do have several people that I play 9 holes with, which is a 2-hour commitment. I actually have a group that I belong to that is women who work, and we play late on Wednesday afternoons, once it's daylight long enough for us to do that. And I really do enjoy that a lot. We're not competitive at all. We have several beginners in the group. And so we may all tee off and just decide we're going to play somebody's ball on that hole because not everybody had a good tee shot. So, I think it's a friendly game. It's nice to get outdoors. And for me, it's very relaxing.
Ooh, that's a good answer. I know that you said it's a group of ladies, but that sounds like the kind of group that I would like to join, where you kind of just wing it as you go. That sounds pretty fun. Like, what's the best course you've ever played? And also, do you have a bucket list course that you hope someday to make it to?
Yeah. So for your listeners, we all just watched the US Open yesterday. And I have to say, Oakmont is not on my bucket list. I think it would eat my lunch. I know several people that have played it that have said that you could put them at 150 yards in the middle of the fairway and they still couldn't break 80. Really
Wow.
good golfers have told me that. So definitely Augusta would be on my bucket list. And I have not played Pebble Beach. I would really like to. My husband has played there multiple times and has promised me a trip there. We are lucky enough. We live outside of Jacksonville in Ponte Vedra. And so we live on one of the courses at TPC Sawgrass where they play the Players Championship. And we go to that tournament every year. And so, I have to say, that's one of my favorite courses. But there's a lot of great ones out there. And, it's something that is also a fun thing to do when you go on a trip, is to decide if there's a golf course that you want to play and plan a trip there.
Yeah, I love that. My dad he doesn't golf anymore. He doesn't play enough to actually enjoy it and be decent at it to, keep that going. But he had played at the Broadmoor in Colorado Springs, where it's right in the mountains and it looks gorgeous. So I totally understand taking a full trip just to go golfing.
Yeah, there's a lot of great places. My husband has played golf his whole life. He played in college and we met at the golf course.
Oh, cool. I love that. Well, speaking of trips, what is the best trip you've ever taken?
Okay, well, let me just start off by saying that, I'm on the road almost every week. And so when I don't have to travel, I prefer to stay at home. When my husband retired, we moved to Florida, where we live now, and we actually moved to the place that we most love to go on vacation. And so I'm lucky enough to now live in our favorite vacation spot, which is Ponte Vedra Beach, Florida. But I've taken a lot of great trips. Memorable ones were Paris, France. I love Paris. One of my best friends from college lives in Geneva, Switzerland. It's a great place. I like San Francisco. There's a lot of places.
Yeah, that's awesome.
That we live in our favorite vacation spot now.
I know, that's the way to do it.
Well, and I will say, I recently was able to go to Ponte Vedra. We stayed at the Ponte Vedra Inn and Club, which I'm sure you know. It's probably right there. Yeah, I mean, it is absolutely beautiful. So I can see why you're just content to hang at home and play on the beach with your dog.
Yes.
That's wonderful.
Well, do you have any fun travel on the horizon besides work, or maybe a fun work trip? I know you're in Vegas right now for work.
Yeah, but this is a whirlwind because I'm going to leave late tonight. So, confession, we just bought a house that is a huge renovation project for probably the next 5 months. And so I will be at home as much as possible, focused on that. But we're super excited about it. It's on the golf course at Sawgrass and will be just a little over half a mile from the beach. And the reason why we're making this move is we wanted to be able to own a golf cart and just throw our dog in the golf cart and go to the beach. So that was a bucket list thing for us. So that's what I'm working on right now.
Amazing. Okay, last question. Sounds like you're very busy right now, so there might be no answer to this, but we always like to ask for a recommendation, either a book, show you're watching, a movie, a new band you discovered. Is there anything that you would recommend to our listeners?
Gosh. So for enjoyment, I love to listen to podcasts. And not always business related, really just for fun. I love country music. And so I enjoy the Bobby Bones Show podcast because he will interview musicians. And I just love hearing their stories and hear them talk about their careers. Ina Garten has a great podcast, Be My Guest. She's not doing it right now, but you can still listen to the old episodes and they are fabulous. She has famous people come to her house and she makes something specifically with them in mind and you listen in on their conversation. My favorite one is with Stephen Colbert and his wife. It's almost like they're having a little party and I wished so bad I could have just been sitting there at the table with them. Well, Martha Stewart actually has a really great podcast as well. And she talks to, it's a pretty heady crowd that she gets as her guests. I just like listening to them talk about their lives and their business experiences. So that's what I like to do for enjoyment. If I've had a long day and I'm getting on a flight, typically I'll listen to something like that more for enjoyment, more relaxing.
Yeah, no, that's a great answer. Whenever I travel, I like to listen to podcasts too, because it's like you have some friends along with you as you're walking through the airport or whatever the case may be. So
Exactly.
Great answer. Well, Tracy, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a wonderful conversation, and I know that our listeners will get so much value out of this. So thank you so much for joining us.
It's my pleasure. Thank you. Thank you for having me. Nice to be here with both of you.
For all of our listeners, please subscribe to Beyond Benefits with Benefits Pro anywhere you get your podcasts. And if you want to rate us, we'd love your feedback. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to email me over at pwilson@benefitspro.com, or you can email Lily at lpeterson@alm.com.
And thank you to our producer, Zach. Join us again next time for a new episode of Beyond Benefits with Benefits Pro. Until then, thanks for listening.